Hello, you're watching Eye on Africa on France 24. I'm Clarisse Fortuné. Coming up on the program. A deadly ambush in northern Mali leaves at least 50 soldiers dead in what could be the military's deadliest loss in years. Mali's army that relies heavily on Russian support faces an insurgency that seems increasingly confident. And meanwhile, Nigeria is facing a new challenge in its own war against jihadists. Foreign fighters are joining insurgent groups, bringing skills and technology that could make an already deadly conflict even harder to contain. And this striking U-turn in Senegalese politics. President Bassirou Diomaye Faye is now backing former President Macky Sall's bid for UN Secretary General just months after Dakar withheld its support. Faye now says the bid will serve both Senegal and Africa. Mali's military has suffered one of its deadliest losses in years. At least 50 soldiers were killed in an ambush near the northern town of Anefis in an attack claimed by Tuareg separatists and Al-Qaeda-linked jihadists. The assault is the latest in a string of setbacks, with militants also targeting Malian and Russian Africa Corps forces, downing a military helicopter and briefly seizing territory. Joining us now is Henny Sabia. He's a West Africa senior analyst at ACLED, the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project. Thank you for being with us. So first,
thank you for having me.
Major incidents in different towns in a space of a week that have captured international attention. So what do they tell us about the current trajectory of the conflict in Mali?
Yes, so to contextualize the latest attack, first of all, there was a coordinated offensive, unprecedented, involving the Al-Qaeda-affiliated Jama Nusratul Islam al-Muslimin and the Tuareg-led separatists from the Azawad Liberation Front on the 25th of April. This coordinated offensive targeted major towns across the country and also led to the recapture of Kidal by rebel and militant forces, which also was a symbolic victory that reversed some of the major gains by the military regime and the Russian partners from previously Wagner and now the Africa Corps. So in that way, it was a very symbolic victory, a strategic one that reversed some significant gains that have been the centerpiece of the regime's narrative of reconquering territory. And more recently, between the 4th and 9th of July, there was a protracted battle for the locality of Anefis, situated in the north of the country, and one of the few positions still held by government forces in the northern Kidal region. And the joint forces of the Africa Corps and the Malian armed forces, they managed to successfully defend the military base there, despite, heavy losses in both camps, but also tactics involving weaponized drones, suicide car bombs. That really speaks to the evolution of tactics on the battlefield, and what I would describe as a war of attrition.
And you also argue in your report that these events expose the Malian military's dependence on Russia's Africa Corps. So how significant is that alliance today?
It's very significant. The regime finds in the Russian forces an essential lifeline. So even when we look back at the coordinated offensive of 25th of April, that resulted in the death of Defense Minister Camara, the Russians, they played a central role in preventing a more rapid collapse, not only in the ranks of the Malian armed forces, but also the potential fall of the regime itself, since it's extremely destabilized and fragilized. However, they managed to turn the situation somewhat to their favor. However, as I already mentioned, they lost the Kidal, which is a significant former rebel stronghold that was taken over by Malian forces and the Wagner Group in November 2023. However, these gains have now been reversed.
Sorry. One significant as well incident is the fact that JNIM has brought down a second Mi-24 helicopter in 2 weeks. So what does tell us about the group's weaponry and military capabilities?
I mean, they are developing their tactics. They are acquiring more advanced weaponry, especially through the use of weaponized drones. And the Malian armed forces, they rely heavily on aircraft, including helicopters, drones, and also fixed-wing aircraft. And these are quite hard to replace and very costly. And it also comes in the context of Russia allegedly refusing to provide more of these types of hardware to military forces in the region. So losing 2 Mi-24 helicopters in the course of 2 weeks is significant, even though they haven't, as far as I know, been brought down with any advanced weaponry, but rather with heavy machine guns or anti-air cannons.
That's all we have time for, unfortunately. Heni Sabia, West Africa Senior Analyst at ACLED, the Armed Conflicts, Location and Event Data Project. Thank you very much.
Most welcome.
And Nigeria has also been battling a jihadist insurgency and for nearly 2 decades. Yet, a decisive military victory remains elusive. Now security officials are facing a new challenge, the arrival of foreign fighters, including some from the Middle East. Analysts say they are bringing expertise, tactics and technology that are strengthening insurgent groups and complicating the military's counter-insurgency efforts. Sam Olukoya has more.
Nigeria continues to record evidence of foreign fighters entering the country to join the ranks of jihadist groups like Boko Haram and the Islamic State West African province. Recent evidence include the arrest of a suspected Sudanese fighter. Last week, the military recovered a camcorder from jihadists, which showed the presence of 2 Arabs, a Moroccan and another foreign fighter. Several security reports show that many fighters from the Middle East and Asia have joined the ranks of the insurgents. The influx of foreign fighters to Nigeria come as various reports show that terrorist groups in Nigeria and some West African countries are growing more sophisticated. The growing sophistication of local armed groups is the result of the advanced training, skills, and technology brought in by foreign fighters. A new report by the UN warned that armed groups in the region are increasingly using drones, sophisticated communications, and cryptocurrencies while coordinating operations across borders. Another recent report showed that Boko Haram fighters are using artificial intelligence for weapons maintenance and advanced explosive assembly. With the influx of foreign fighters and the growing sophistication of armed groups, the military is under greater pressure to combat an armed insurgency, which it had failed to contain in the last 17 years.
Now, in a striking political turnaround, Senegal has thrown its support behind former President Macky Sall's bid to become the next UN Secretary General, describing it as a bid that serves both Senegal and Africa. The endorsement was announced after a meeting between the 2 men in Dakar, despite Senegal having withheld support for Sall's candidacy within the African Union just months ago. Aminatou Diallo reports from Dakar.
The decision marks a dramatic political shift in Senegal while giving Macky Sall a major boost on the international stage. The announcement came in a statement from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which said Senegal would fully support Macky Sall's candidacy for UN Secretary General and mobilize to promote his bid. Yet, just a few months ago, Dakar was taking a very different position. In late March, around 20 African Union member states, including Senegal, refused to back the former president's bid to succeed Antonio Guterres. Macky Sall left office in 2024 after years of political turmoil that left dozens dead. And since taking power, President Diomaye's administration has launched investigations into the management of public finances under Sall, with audits alleging that debt and budget deficits were understated during his presidency. Against that backdrop, supporting Sall's international ambitions would have seemed politically unthinkable, but Senegal's political landscape has shifted. This decision comes at a time when the president appears politically weakened following his split with his longtime friend and ally Ousmane Sonko and his party PASTEF, the majority force in the parliament. For some observers, this rapprochement with Macky Sall's camp could be a strategic move to broaden Faye's political base. The endorsement projects an impact of unity behind the Senegalese candidate seeking one of the world's most prestigious diplomatic posts.
And we've reached the end of our program. Thank you for watching Eye on Africa. Stay tuned for more news on France 24.
Since 2006, in French, English, Arabic and Spanish, the world's most influential figures trust us with exclusive interviews. Global leaders sharing their visions for the future.
Vous avez 142 pays qui ont signé la déclaration de New York.
Artists and creators spark inspiration. Thought leaders and innovators shape what's next. The biggest names are on France 24. Liberté, égalité, actualité.